thank you so much for coming to this session. So this session is dedicated to the overall framing of AI for good, what it actually means to the experts that we have today on the panel, what it means to you, and what it means to a larger audience. So we do have 1.5 hours to answer the meaning of life. I hope that we'll get to that together with you. Just so you know, this is of course a panel, but you're part of this experience too. There will be lots of time for questions. And yeah, I'm looking forward to diving right in. So the reason why we chose this particular topic, or why I chose it, is that it feels that there's two schools of thought in the AI discourse right now. You have the people that explore everything that we can do with AI as technology. And there's the school of thought of people that are looking at what we can do with AI to make our lives better. And what we'll be diving in today is what is a good life and how can we bring that in and engineer that into artificial intelligence. So what we'll basically be doing is we'll try to define a good life. We'll explore a bit of the mediating factors, moderating factors to that definition, talk a bit about the public discourse and the framing of the conversation, and then have a future outlook. So I have two incredibly interesting people with me for this conversation. I've been waiting for this conversation for months, and I'm very happy to have them because we have two very interesting perspectives that come to discuss this. On the one side, we have Lauritzen, who's a philosopher, a tech philosopher and tech inventor from Denmark. A very special, I feel, combination to have a philosopher also on the inventive kind of things of AI. And we're with us Katharina Masel. And Eva is the head of the Department of Palliative Medicine at the University of Vienna. And your job is accompanying patients at the end of her life. So we have two very interesting viewpoints on what makes a good life from a tech philosophy perspective and from a lived experience perspective. So we'll try to bring those together to understand the phenomenon in itself better. A bit about me. I'm Alina Nikolaou. I'm doing the curation at TEDAI, and my background is actually in VR for good. If you remember VR, that was also a thing. Who was in VR before they were in AI? Thank you, sir. There was one brave man. We're gonna get some coffee together. But what I did is we did behavioral experiments on how we can use VR for persuasive influence. Can we get people through VR to think more positively about migration, about climate change, these kind of things. So before we dive into the rest of the panel, I'd like to know from you, Eva, and it'd be about what you expect from this conversation. Maybe. Eva?
I'm happy to be here. Thank you so much. As a palliative care physician, I'm used to sitting in rooms with 5 people or so on, because the topic is hard to get. But mostly I experience when people are thinking about the end of life and the way to the end of life, that they feel better afterwards. So what I would hope is that people, in a way, even though you might expect that things are going to be hard, would feel in a way better and relaxed after the conversation.
Yeah. Oh, that sounds wonderful. I'm very happy to be here as well. Thank you for inviting me. I think I hope for a lot of interesting questions, not only from you. I'm sure you have a lot of interesting questions, and not only from us up here, but also from you guys. I spend a lot of time researching questions. I think I collected 30,000 questions or something like that from across the world. And it's always a great pleasure to understand human beings through the lens of their questions. Mm-hmm. So that's what I'm hoping to be inspired by your questions.
So if you want to, now will be the time to also introduce yourselves. We'd be very curious to see who is in the room with us. Maybe if you want to, we have 3 to 4 people to stand up and explain what brings them to the topic. Also, what you do in the realm of AI for good. Do you do that professionally, from a business perspective, community building perspective? Do we have anybody who works in AI for good specifically? Again, one brave man. What's going on? So there to the mic in the back, if you want to quickly introduce yourself.
Hi there, I'm Alex. I work with AI in Italy. We do education mostly, and one of the questions we get from business leaders or educators, like, where are we going with AI, right? Because we have the technology, and it's great. It's helping us unlock a lot of things, but like, what's the ultimate goal? How is it making our life better? Right? Is it a human connection that's being improved? Is it a more creative life? So I'm kind of curious maybe to have answers in the future for this. So thank you.
Thank you, Alex. Anybody else who works in AI for good and wants to share their points? One sir there and then in the back.
Hi, thank you. I work at an impact investing fund. We invest in healthcare, education, financial inclusion. And our investment committee keeps asking me what we should be investing in regarding AI. So I'm looking forward to your advice to take back to our investment committee. Thank you.
Pressure.
I'm not answering. And there was one lady in the middle.
Hi, I'm a teacher, but computer science. We have a project which is AI for good. So every year the kids are looking at designing apps focused purely around AI for good, and they inspire me every year. They come up with, So I'm interested to hear about yours and take back that thoughts and what we're going to hear today to the pupils at school.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Wonderful. We got to many other points and questions later on, but it already helped a little bit understand where those three people are coming from. So I would like to start with a common definition of for good in the beginning. Language is important. Sharing common definitions is important. Pia, you're the philosopher in the conversation. How would you approach trying to define a good life?
Well, I would start by saying that a good life can be defined, but we may not want to ask how to define it, but who should define it. I think it's important that we don't get too caught up in thinking that we can define what a good life is, and acknowledge that basically as humans we were all born into this world without knowing why and without knowing for how long. And this basic condition makes all of us look for definitions and look for answers and look for ways to navigate this life. And for us to actually be human, we need to have the space to ask these questions, and we need to have the space to come up with our own definitions. So what we can do is that we can talk to each other about how we go about asking these questions and who we turn to and why we turn to the people we do and who we want to be and where we want to go. But taking responsibility for defining a good life on behalf of each other, I think we should be very careful with that.
And when you say we need to find spaces to at least try to approach defining it for ourselves, what spaces would that be, for example?
Well, connecting around the questions that we are asking. The German philosopher Friedrich Nietzsche, he gave the best definition of a human being I've ever heard. Because I would never go there. I would never say, let's define what a human being is. But he just said, it's fairly simple. Being human is about being the not yet defined animal. So this not yet, we want to be defined. We know that we want the answers. We want to have a purpose. We want to have meaning in our lives, but we are not yet there. That's how we are born into this world. And this distinction between being born into this world and being designed, like AI and all kinds of technology, that's something that is designed for a purpose. We are not. We're just being born into this world, and now we have to find our way. So creating spaces like this one where we can have this kind of conversations, but also in families, with kids. When kids ask a question, we think they want an answer, but oftentimes they don't. They ask a question because they want to connect with us, because they want to share this basic condition of not knowing and being assured that they're not alone. And that's very, very difficult to build technology that can give us that feeling of connection, connecting around this condition of not knowing, that it's totally okay. We don't know, and that's fine, because that can help us move forward together.
So Eva, I think it would be important also for the room to maybe on the one side explain to us what your daily job looks like, and also how you then see a good life, or the definition of a good life playing out in your daily life.
As a palliative care doctor, I learned that it's very important to listen, to listen. And if you ask a question, if you ask ChatGPT or a chatbot, you get an immediate answer. But if you ask a human being, sometimes it takes some time until the answer is coming. So what I do as a palliative care physician is it's not only about dying, it's about people living with the disease, not suffering, not just suffering from a disease, people living with diseases and their surroundings, their family members, their friends, and asking them, who are you and what do we need to know about you as a person to give you the best possible care that we can? And on first sight, people say, I have penicillin allergy, because they are not used to these questions. They are not used that doctors are asking them, who are you as a person? So defining a good life, in my opinion, starts by yourself. And what I see is that life and the way to death is something universal, but it's a very individual thing for different people. But people approaching the end of life have the same things they are questioning. It's like being surrounded by people who I love or who I'm loved by. It is about, did my life make sense until now? And what's the sense of life? Very big question. Goes back to you. And the third thing maybe is nobody wants to suffer. People are very afraid of suffering. So my job is kind of asking questions and also thinking in best case and worst case scenarios, because every one of us has fears. And if you talk about your fears, it helps. It might help just to approach the fears and also to say what you would wish for. It sounds very easy, but it's very hard. And we've lost this a bit in medicine, in my opinion, because medicine is very complex and we don't really listen. We do ask questions, but we don't wait for the answer. We don't have so much time in medicine. We are very impatient mostly. And so this is maybe something where we could have an enhancement by using artificial intelligence to have more time.
And when you work with patients or also in your research, right, have you seen or observed factors or patterns of what makes a good life in hindsight?
Yeah, it depends a bit on how you're socialized, how your access to medicine is happening. It depends about the biography of a person, but to many people, a good life is that you are free to decide, that you are not captured by surroundings like war, like poverty, like having no social surroundings. So there are also ministries of loneliness in the meantime. This is not a joke. There are ministries of loneliness. So I think many people do feel very, very lonely if they don't have friends, if they don't have a social surrounding. So I think what's very important to have a good life, at least it's about feelings, in my opinion. This is also what I notice in my job, that it's very much about feelings. I've never seen somebody who said, when people are dying the last few days, I want to go back to my bureau and make some things there. Nobody until now told me that.
How would you react if somebody would tell you that?
Yeah, but for sure. As a palliative care physician, I would say, let's bring you there if it's possible in a way. So we also do have this last wish things. There are people caring for other people to fulfill their last wishes. And you would think last wish would be like going to the sea once again, or some very special things, but the last wishes are very basic. It's like going back to home just once more, seeing some old place where I was lucky. So the big things are getting really small when people are facing the end of life, and the small things are getting really big.
Mm-hmm. Of course, it's very hard to find a common definition for everybody, but I think what I'm hearing from both of your ends is, right, it's community and not being alone, but then also having the freedom to be alone and be oneself and not being bound to external factors. Pia, based on what you've been seeing and your research, how does this play out across, for example, different populations? When we're looking at LGBTQ populations, for example, different countries and cultures, what do you think are factors that we need to have on the table to have these conversations?
I think we sometimes forget that all these, when we talk about we want our freedom, we want to be able to make our own decisions, we want to be able to define our own meaning and purpose, it can sound like we would all choose differently. And sometimes maybe we would, but underneath that, that's where the philosophy from my perspective come in. Underneath that, there are some basic human features. So it's something about curiosity, it's something about the ability to define our own world, as we talked about before, to use the names that make sense, not to be told you're supposed to think like this or you're supposed to do things like this, but just being able to say, well, I hear what you're saying, I don't agree, I want to do it differently. That's very key to all of us. And sometimes when we look at our differences, we forget that. We tend to see the differences, maybe because they're more obvious based on how we dress or how we talk or how we look. But the second you start, as I have been doing with my research, start studying the questions people ask, it all the time comes down to the same thing. It comes down to asking questions because we want to consider our own position, understand where am I in this thing, connect with each other, and commit to a shared purpose. I do it like this because typically I just draw it as the magical question triangle. That's what we want to do. We want to consider, connect, and commit. And that's true for all of us. So if we can just get to that point where we understand that although she looks different, although she says things I really don't understand and I don't agree with, she's probably searching. She's in this desire to know something that she doesn't know, and maybe she's not comfortable sharing that she doesn't know, because that's another basic human feature. We don't like coming off as stupid, or we don't like sharing that we have this ignorance living inside of us. But if we can just see that in each other, then the differences lose some of their meaning.
Yeah.
And something else can get meaning then.
I think here it will be a good moment to bring it back to technology and to bring it back to AI, because one could argue that technology has a very much factored in these perceived or actual big differences between us. There's polarization palpable in the air. It feels, and one could argue that technology is playing very much into it. So now that we've tried to circle around what a for good life is, and there is community there, there's freedom there, there's self-agency there as well, let's define AI for this conversation, because if I ask everybody here, everybody will give a different definition. Pia, you as tech philosopher, do you want to give us maybe a working definition for this?
Yeah, I can do that. Or what I can do is I can share that I typically go to Alan Turing because he was one of the founding fathers of AI. I'm figuring he might have a good definition. So when you read the 1950 article, Computing Machinery and Intelligence, he actually gives a pretty clear definition of how to understand AI. And the good thing about going back to basics is that you also get an idea of the assumptions that were built into AI from the very beginning. Some of the assumptions that we don't necessarily discuss today, because now we just look at AI as it is today. But what was the assumptions about what it means to be human, what it means to think, what it means to be creative that were built into AI? And as some of you probably know, maybe all of you, he introduced the imitation game. Today we call it the Turing test, where he introduced 3 different players, saying, imagine that you have a game played by player A, that's a man. All of them are humans in the beginning. So we have player A, that's a man. His job is to pretend that he's a woman. Okay. Then we have player B, that is a woman, and her job is to tell the truth. So no matter what she's asked, she just needs to be truthful. And then we have player C, it's the interrogator asking all the questions, in order to determine who is who. So player C cannot see player A and player B, asking questions like, player A, what's it like to give birth, for instance? That's a question I came up with myself because I thought it would be difficult for the man to come up with a good answer. Turing didn't give this example, he gave something else. But so asking these questions, and then at some point saying, okay, now the game is over. I think that player A is the man and player B is the woman, or vice versa. That's the game. And then he says, what would happen if we replaced player A with a machine? Not player B, not player C, only player A. And that's a genius move from Turing, because what he's doing is that he's saying, let's build a machine that imitates the only player that is already imitating. Okay? So no matter what happens, the machine is supposed to pretend that it knows everything, can do everything, is everything, just like a man pretending that he knows what it's like to give birth, which is kind of ridiculous, right? But nonetheless, this is what AI was designed to do, designed to deceive, I typically say, because it's become so very, very brilliant at that we tend to forget it. We tend to forget that the basic idea with building AI was to build this machine that always knows how to answer the questions that are coming from human beings, no matter whether it knows or doesn't know or can or cannot do whatever the task it's being given. So that's how I define AI, and just translate it into Turing's into that. That's what it's designed to do, and it's very good at it.
And based on this definition, and let's stick with this definition because having one, at least for this conversation, is helpful. In your opinion, do you think that the chatbots, regardless and agnostic of companies, do deliver any for good outcomes based on what we discussed beforehand?
Not at all.
That's the end of the panel, guys. Thank you. Thank you for coming. But why? Tell us why.
There are so many problems with how generative AI and chatbots and stuff like that are being used. One was actually mentioned this morning in the panel kicking off this day, where they talked about the problem of designing chatbots in a way so it looks like how we communicate with each other. So it's exactly the same interface if I text my daughter or if I ask ChatGPT a question. It's the same kind of design. That makes it very difficult for me to connect with the things we talked about before, these basic conditions, this basic need for connection with another human being. So I will automatically start translating some of these needs into the machine, and it cannot deliver because it's the design to deceive thing, right? So it will do whatever it can to live up to that design, which will confuse me, which will make it difficult for me to understand and appreciate the difference between texting my daughter and writing ChatGPT. And although my daughter probably doesn't have the same answers and all of the answers, if the whole point, as I mentioned in the beginning, of us asking questions is to find our way in this world and to connect with each other and feel like we're part of something bigger than just these scared creatures not having a purpose, not knowing why and for how long, well, then it's a problem that I don't actually connect with other human beings because I'm deceived into thinking that AI can do something for me that it cannot, because that's not what it was designed to do.
How do you think about this topic, Eva? Because also explain to what extent AI even plays a role in your current working everyday life, and to what extent maybe some of the rational, even deceiving capabilities of AI are helpful, less helpful in what you're doing.
So I'm just a doctor, and in preparing for this, I learned a lot about, to me, at the beginning, AI, it was just a chatbot, when everyone was using it in medicine, it already entered medicine, that people are, because it's always available, are just using it, asking some things, preparing some talks, preparing some lectures for the students, which also has its many dangers, but it entered medicine in diagnostics, and there it can be really good, for example, in detecting melanoma, skin cancer, or in radiology, oncology, many other fields of medicine. It also can correct your grammar, which to me, as a neurotic person concerning grammar and marks, is sometimes something I also find quite okay. But the bigger thing is that it's kind of a black box, because right now you don't know if somebody you meet in medicine, or for example, when I'm giving a palliative care talk to the students, many people don't declare that they are using artificial intelligence. And when you're writing a paper, a medical research paper, in the meantime, you have to declare it, that you use it. But at the beginning, people didn't do so. So this, to me, it's a very complex and big field. And in my profession as a palliative care physician, you can never replace the human connection. Sitting at a bed at the end of life, for sure, cannot be replaced. So I would rather see it in my field as a tool that I'm going to use to make my daily work a bit easier. But when it comes to connection at the end of life, and to really see people as a person, then it's useless to me. Currently.
I have to challenge you on that, because I remember when we had our preparation call, and I noted that down for the day, we had one conversation that sometimes disconnection can have for good outcomes as well, especially in your field. And I remember you telling us that sometimes this idea of, for example, getting older, needing somebody to take care of you physically, feels more comfortable when, for example, a humanoid AI-powered robot is taking care of you instead of an actual human. Because this disconnection allows for maybe less shame or less embarrassment. And that really stuck with me.
There was a study on that people were asked if a robot would care for you, if a robot would even wash you. People would say, no, I don't want to be cared for by a robot. But people were like, kind of, okay, the robot should do it, because then I don't have to be ashamed. This is what people often tell. I don't want to be a burden to my family, which has many aspects that are also very dangerous, because in a good society, we should invest in things that people don't feel that they are a burden. And yeah, it's a very interesting outcome. There are also some hotels, but a hotel, it's a different thing, going to a hotel where robots are working than to being washed by a robot, in my opinion. But maybe whatever the future will bring, we were talking about a woman who was seeing her dead daughter, who died when she was 4 years old, and she was visiting her as an avatar. For sure, it wasn't her daughter, but then the woman got a shitstorm, and I thought, this is a woman who lost her child, and maybe she was just helpless. And then what people tend to do is starting shitstorms. So I think we have to be very careful, because when it comes to ourselves, we don't know how we would feel. Maybe if you would say, I can see my grandmother again, if it comes to yourself, how would you answer? So I think it always should go back to us when we are thinking about the bigger things and asking ourselves questions, to go back to the start, because otherwise, to me, it's too hard to answer all these questions.
Yeah. What do you think, Pia, about this weird relationship between connection, disconnection with AI?
I remember the conversation as well, and I was inspired by this idea. Are there areas within medicine, for instance, but also maybe in education, where it makes sense to take the person out of the equation for a while in order to increase the connection after? I think that's interesting. And when I said a clearly no before, when you asked about if the chatbots and stuff like that, then it's very much because chatbots are designed to do some of the work that I think should not be done by machines. typically I make this distinction between, I say there are 3 big E's that we should leave out of the AI discussion: the existential questions, the ethical questions, and the epistemological questions. So questions about who are we and why are we here, and questions about what is a good life and what is the right thing to do, and questions about how do we know and how do we deal with what we don't know. But beyond these basic questions, there are so many other questions that has to do with health and education and productivity and innovation and science, where I am very, very humble and very curious about how can a technology like AI actually be used for something and achieve something that we would not be able to do otherwise. As long as we remember that the task and the purpose must never be to, also mentioned actually in the panel this morning, to increase or remove friction. Because it is part of life that we need to feel sorrow sometimes. We need to connect with the fact that he is dead. And no matter how, the machine can help me feel that he's not, or at some point I need to face that, that he is dead, in order to move on, in order to not move on as now I forgot him, but move on as now I'm ready to take my relationship with him into a different domain. That being said, I never lost a child, thank God. So I'm totally humble to what you're saying. I think it's a beautiful point, Eva, that being wise on behalf of someone else is so much easier than facing, okay, so what would you do if you were never able to see him again?
And it's also, I once asked ChatGPT to make a palliative care joke. And I just wanted to see what it make a joke about palliative care, and it answered me, it's very unethical to make a palliative care joke. How boring is that?
Yeah.
But if you ask again, you get a different answer. So,
I mean, the embodied and lived experience in judging what is for good and AI for good, how do you think does that play into the people that build these technologies? And let's be honest, I think AI for good is a label that governments and corporations like to use a lot, oftentimes as a euphemism for other things, oftentimes as a marketing slogan, and oftentimes also genuinely. How do you think can we, or the people who build AI, either chatbots or AI for science, be more mindful of this? And I'm looking at you, Pia, because you're an inventor yourself. What do you think?
I think my biggest issue with this AI for good concept is that it emphasizes the idea that technology and AI is a tool that we can use for whatever we want. We can use it for good or we can use it for bad. And that basically means that we are in control. So if something goes wrong, it's because we made a bad decision. It's because we decided to use it for this instead of for that. And we should have been using it for that. And this idea, this understanding of technology as a tool, as a mean to, an end that we define, I think is basically wrong. Mm-hmm. The German philosopher Martin Heidegger, he actually talked about the essence of technology. So insisting that not only do we have an essence and the tree has an essence and everything, that's alive has its own essence somehow, but technology does too. And he described the essence as this, basically that we are given a promise that no matter what we do, we are better off if we use technology than if we don't. Mm-hmm. It's true for all technology. That's kind of the promise. Use me, right? If you use me, you will be faster, you will be smarter, you will be prettier. They don't know, everything is possible if you use me. And that promise is problematic because it prevents me from asking a basic question like, well, do I even need technology for this? So instead I ask, when can I use it? How can I use it? For what can I use it? I start asking these kind of questions that is in service of the technology instead of in service of what do I need right now and what would be good. Maybe I don't need technology. I need to look Alina in the eye and connect on that stage and don't think, is this a good social media post or whatever, having these technologies starting to design how we think instead of the other way around. So I think it's very, very dangerous for us to talk about technology as a tool. We need to constantly remind ourselves that by doing that, we give ourselves a position of being in control. And basically, we're not. Not if we don't ask the questions that we need to ask in order to come up with our own answers.
But here I have to drill a bit more, because we had the gentleman before and ask about funding. Because one could counter-argue and say that if you try to build an AI for good tool, whatever that looks like, whether it's education, tourism, mindfulness, for example, mental health, etc., and you try to engineer it back from the for good outcome to the technology itself, it might get tricky to get funding in the first place. I think everybody who's in the AI for good, or in general for good and community building community, does see challenges in there. How have you been practically facing that with what you've been building?
I think we need to ask ourselves if I'm just a little bit right in some of the things I'm saying, then what we really want is to build technology that doesn't go into the areas that it shouldn't go into. And then we need to rethink how we design technology. Do we need technology that is, we need to be able to distinguish when do we need and when do we not need technology. I have the 3 basic E's, as I mentioned before. Just keep it out of there. So if this is, if we want to build connection, we want to help people connect with each other in care, for instance, then we should make sure that we don't bring in technology in these key moments where we know it's essential to human being to actually be reflected and be connected with another human being. But the technology we do build, and as I said before, I think there are a lot of use cases. How do we design that in a way so it doesn't confuse us? Because right now the problem is that we have so much technology that is very good at the deceiving part. Back to Turing. It's very, very good at the deceiving part, pretending that it can help us with anything. And it's not only the chatbots, it's the promise we get. You can do, the promise is you can achieve more by doing less, right? That's a basic promise all over. And that's just not the case all the time. So how do we build companies that build technology that is very careful to have a stock? We're not going to go there with technology. We will leave this to the psychologists or the philosophers or the priests or the doctors or whatever, human beings. And we will not go there. I don't know how you get big tech founders to accept the fact that there are places they shouldn't go. But I think it would be very, very important if you insist on having a good conversation in how you fund, for instance.
What about you? Do you see any relationship connection between medical experts and the people who build the AI tools that medical experts are using? Or is it disconnected?
Yeah, for sure. In the future, I mean, it's a bit like Star Wars. There are two things, the dark ones and the good ones. And if you look at pictures of concerts in the 80s, nobody had a mobile phone. And when you look at pictures of concerts today, everyone is with the mobile phones. And so these things they have already entered the room and they won't disappear. So I think we got to deal with them. What in medicine, in my field, what's very important, patient-reported outcome measurement, which means if you have a prompts, not a prompt, but prompts. If you have a pain or dyspnea or nausea or if you can't sleep, you have to look if you really can help the people, Because a long time ago, palliative care, it was evolving in the 70s, and then people were receiving a lot of thank you letters. You're very nice people, very nice, caring people. But we didn't really know what we maybe can't do so well and what we could do better. And I think here there is a big chance to maybe look who needs what kind of care, who needs access to what kind of medicine, and where do we fail and what can we do better. And their big data in medicine are really important to help us. Mm-hmm. So I think this doesn't replace us as doctors or as teams or as professionals, but it might give us some feedback that's really useful to make things better, because everyone says we have to get better. And I mean, medicine is so modern and so complex in the meantime, but many people say it was better. 20 years ago, it was better. So why is that? That's very interesting to me, because maybe some things are going too fast, or people don't understand anymore, or we don't talk to each other anymore, just looking at our, everyone has these necks because of looking to the phones. So we need free spaces, I think. I think the artist Marina Abramovic, she's coming to Vienna on the 10th of October to the Albertina Modern. She has those seminars where you go to, I guess, to Greece, and you for 4 days you don't get food, and you don't have any mobile phone, and it's fully booked. And people are also booking it for their husbands and their wives. So goodbye. You go there, and people are really, they are like craving for, where is my iPhone? Where is my mobile? Where is my chatbot? So interesting. And maybe we need some islands in the future to come off again of all these technologies. I don't know.
So if you're looking for a Christmas gift this year, you know what you're going to do. I was wondering, for the people and the patients that you do have, however, having an AI chatbot when you're in isolation, when you're alone, isn't it better than having nothing?
Yeah, Robinson Crusoe.
Yeah, Paul.
Yeah, the 3 things you would take to an island. It's a very hard question because people are lying. They're trying to say some cool things, and it would be maybe a beer and a beer and a beer. I don't know. People are lying when you ask them these kind of questions. Mm-hmm.
I don't think so. I don't think it's better. I think you will always, if you can listen to an ebook, if you can still see something, read a book. It's not like we don't have, now I use the word tools, but that's not what I mean. We have always had things to help us deal with feeling lonely. I don't think a chatbot is belong to the good part of the things we have. Books does, music does, a dog does, a cat does, listening to the birds and the trees, just listening to the wind in the trees. All these things are way better if you're feeling lonely than a chatbot. And I know I sound very convinced, but that's because I am very convinced. But,
there was this movie where someone fell in love with a chatbot.
Her was now it's just in the newspaper.
But now it's not something special anymore.
No,
yeah,
exactly.
So wrapping up, and before we open it up to your questions and your comments, if we now look at the outcome, the good life, and again we said everybody defines it differently depending on your perspective, on your background, age, etc. We do have the factors of connection, of freedom, of self-agency. Take a bit of time and think of an AI tool that could deliver that in your field. I mean, just like in terms of imagining how that would look like, perhaps.
Yeah, maybe the right point. I'm asked when it's the right point to start an end-of-life discussion. Some people are irritated by the word end-of-life discussion because it sounds so hard, but it's in fact, it's a discussion about life until the end of life. And maybe to identify the right point that's not so crisis triggered, because in my field many people are coming when really everything is rotten, and then there is a metaphor. It says palliative care is the umbrella and not the rain, but mostly, unfortunately, still it's more the rain for the people, because they say, oh, I'm feeling really sick, and right now also palliative care doctor is coming, nobody's happy then. So to do this in an appropriate way and to bring more discussion into society at points, where it maybe can really help to change things, because sometimes it's too late to change anything, and people won't leave the hospital anymore. And in Vienna, 70% of the people having a cancer diagnosis are dying in hospital. And if I would ask you who wants to die in hospital, I mean, dying in hospital can be okay also. It depends, but most people wouldn't answer. They would like to die in hospital. So this, in my opinion, would be really would be really useful, but it's not, there is no lobby behind that. Because a good death, it's important for the family members, for the friends, but I'm not so sure if it's important for people who do investments, but we could ask this back. I don't know.
So a tool that helps you be more aware of the limitation of life and work through it.
Yeah, maybe to initiate discussions about the values you have, about your values, about your goals of care, not goals of career, goals of care, and about thinking about what you would wish for the last phase of your life. And even if you're healthy, you can think about it, but people do not tend to do so.
I agree with the need, and the problem, and I am, again, absolutely sure that AI will not be the solution. I can't, as a philosopher, hearing all these things about critical thinking and being able to deal with some of these existential threats and ethical problems. We talk about guardrails, we talk about all these things that have ethical implications. The solution is not AI. AI, when it comes to these things, AI and a lot of other technologies are the problem. And we need to get them out of that space in order to do good in other spaces. So I have a really hard time seeing how AI would help us become better at critical thinking or become better at asking ourselves the questions we need to ask in order to come into this world and out of this world in a good way.
What do you think? Do you think Pia is right? We need to get AI out of the way for good outcomes? There was, I think, one hand there and then one hand over here.
Maybe it goes more to the triple E concept that you mentioned. I liked it, but I think you put a clear separation and barrier, and I think that's the key answer. If AI can make deterministic decisions, like if you have, I've been once at a doctor, that doctor was brave enough to go and search through his book and try to study, or maybe finding some pictures or things and give me some recommendations. Some don't dare to do that, and I think it was very brave to do that study, but AI can do an amazing job. Searching and learning and remembering all these things cannot be done by a single human. AI has access to images and a lot of data, and I think it's a good thing to use that. But when it comes to those triple E, I think you have a point, but the question is where to put this barrier, especially on ethics. We all know the trolley problems, which there is no answer to that. So there, I think we definitely should stop, because it's not deterministic. No matter how much you think, you cannot know if you have to make a decision, and we all know what is the outcome of the trolley problem. So I think it really, this separation of triple E is the key. So in many cases, AI can help and make amazing contribution to the world. And if it comes to those points, we have to avoid it.
I totally agree. And I think you actually add a very important aspect, that when we're talking about questions that have no clear answers, and that's true for all the existential, ethical, and epistemological questions, because as recalling Turing, the machine is designed to have the answers. It's not designed to tell the truth. It's not designed to ask the questions that need to be asked right now in order to navigate. And the thing is that when it comes to the triple E's, I actually haven't used that term before. I like that. I will use that in the future. The triple E's, the fact is that all of these questions, they don't have any answers. We have to ask them ourselves. But it's also true that it has a huge difference to human beings what the answer is or is not. Every time we're asking a question where the answer is of huge significance to us, then we should not ask AI. Mm-hmm. Existential questions, which basically the difference is life and death. Maybe it's social life or death, or maybe it's something else, but it is essentially the difference between life and death. I think we can all agree that's a huge difference for a human being, whether I'm alive or I'm dead. But it makes absolutely no difference to the machine. absolutely no difference. You can just pull the plug. It doesn't make any difference. And it's the same with the ethical and the epistemological questions. When something has a huge difference, makes a huge difference to human beings, just don't involve AI, because it doesn't know what it means that something makes a difference.
There was a hand here in the first row. Can we have the mic over here?
I'm running mic.
Thank you. So first of all, thank you very much. It was very fascinating. Two things I'm happy today after this call. The first was that 3 women are talking about life, because there were 3 men, the species, so human species will be finished soon. So the other day are 3 women today talking about life. The second thing is that I watch, do you remember TED Talk about Robert Wilberg, like 10, 15 years ago, was about what's a good life. And his definition, which I appreciate they are different, was against about relationship, the quality of relationship we have. So for that reason, I think the human species will never end with AI, because a relationship will make a difference, AI will not replace. I challenge you with the one question, though. How about we define AI for good in a different way? AI for good, because what I feel, what I hear, what both are talking about is lots of good application of AI, which are not human, empathetic, so let's say philosophic reasons, but there's lots of technical things we can do better to have a better life. What I mean is 2 examples. The colleague just say, look at images of cancer. You can scan today thousands and millions of pictures to define if it's a cancer or not. That will free up time from the doctor to spend with the parents. You can do the same in education. You can do a lot to customize for children and give freedom to the teacher to deal with each child in a different way. So and this another example you asked before, I can help the patient about to die. Can the ChatGPT help? No, definitely not. I do agree. However, what I think can help the doctor to be more efficient, to spend more time with the patient. So the question I ask you, and the reason I want to be provocative, I think it is AI for good. We need to define a different way. AI for good is not to make a better life, but make people more free, more efficient, to spend more time with the people they love and a more relationship, have more time for a relationship. That's what AI for good could be, in my view. So I want to hear your view.
What do you think, if I'm sorry for jumping in here, but do you think that if there was an AI chatbot or whatever that helps you, supports you in your everyday working life, that would it free up more time for the patients, or would it free up more time to just have more patients because the system is already overloaded?
I would answer like a lawyer, and I would say it depends.
There is a lawyer.
Yeah, it depends. I mean, to be more efficient is something every one of us, if you hear, please be more efficient, I don't know if this really goes to your heart, because everything needs to be very efficient and on time and beautiful and so on. But in a way, I agree. What I didn't mean is the replacement of these existential questions, but finding time points, time points to care for people in a way that they can be places where they prefer to be. And there, I think in medicine, we have a lot of potential, also in diagnostics, also prognosis is not so, at these end of life care tools, I didn't use them, because there you have to put in the thrombocytes and the albumin levels and so on. And I always found this kind of weird, and it didn't really help. But what helps are having some basic information. For example, there is a question, it's called the surprise question. We could ask it to ourselves. Would you be surprised if this person, or if you would not be alive anymore in 6 months? Yeah? And you would say, yes, I would be surprised. I think you would say so. And then there is the double surprise question. Would you be surprised if this person would still be alive after 6 months? And this is a very, it had many critics, but there are publications on that. This is a very basic question in palliative care, where when you just say yes or no, or 2 times yes or 2 times no, things are going to come up. Yeah? Emergency visits are going to come up, and so on. And so I think here we could have some use of AI in the future. But I also understand all your worries, but can we stop it? This is my question. Can we stop it? Because you can ask everything, and people are asking everything, I think. I don't think that people are sitting in front of a chatbot and say, I'm not going to ask this or that question, because it's like a child. If you say, don't do this, don't ask this, then they are going to ask. So I'm not sure if we really can stop it.
There's a lady here in the front.
Thank you very much. And I think my question goes to Pia. Thank you for being so critical about AI in certain fields. And I'd like to attempt to differentiate that a little bit and see if you disagree, especially when we're talking about those 3 E's. I would ask myself, do we want to ban it completely from those questions and from those fields, or shouldn't we use it to expand our horizon, expand our perspectives, and then empower people to decide for themselves? So do you disagree with using it in fields of expanding our horizon in those areas? And why? Because I love your take on kind of defending our humanity.
Yeah, I do disagree. And I know it sounds... If some of you are thinking, who does she think she is? I can totally understand. But it's the confidence comes from studying some of these old philosophers. And I mentioned Heidegger before. And he actually, 4 years after Alan Turing wrote his article, Heidegger gave a talk called The Question Concerning Technology. And almost nobody knows about this because it didn't have the same impact as Turing's article did, not at all. But what he did in that lecture was that he predicted what would happen on the human side if what Turing predicted on the machine side would happen. Right? So Turing predicted within a few decades, we will have machines competing with human beings in all intellectual fields. It will be able to speed up evolution. It will be able to, put everything that we are limited by on the side. So it will be able to do things that we cannot. That's what Turing predicted by building this child machine, as he called it, and making it learn by itself. And Heidegger said, okay, and what will happen on the human side if we continue to ignore the essence of technology? He said 3 things will happen. First, we will lose touch with technology, meaning we will think that technology can do things that it cannot. We will simply trust it way too much. The second thing that will happen is that we will lose touch with reality. We will start confusing what is real, what is false. We could have a conversation about deep fakes or misinformation and everything else, and we would say, maybe he had a point, right? So we will lose touch with reality. And finally, and that's the most dangerous one, obviously, we will lose touch with ourselves. We will stop trusting our own ability to think, our own ability to ask the questions and come up with the answers, our own ability to navigate life without constantly consulting a machine. And that means, we will stop being human, basically. We will just put all our agency into the machine. And if we think, no, I'm just going to use it for this. It's not my boyfriend, or it's not my, I will just use it a little bit here and a little bit there. And then suddenly we will just have outsourced these basic insecurities and struggles and all these hard stuff, also in terms of education. Why, when we go to school, I don't see the point of learning this. Someone teach me in the way I need to be taught. No. You need to sit there, because right now it's not, you should sit there. Eva is taught the way she needs to be taught. And your job is to be patient, because that's also part of being human, right? And making room. So there are some very, very important aspects here that I'm so grateful for being friends with Heidegger and Nietzsche and stuff like that, people like that, instead of only the investors. Because it's just a different way of thinking. We can be friends if you want.
There's a hand there.
Hi, thank you. Very thought-provoking discussion. I don't have any answers from my investment committee, but I'm going to solve that problem another time. My question, we're basically talking about what it means to be human. And ideally, we create technology that allows us to continue to be human. Now, my take is every technology that I can imagine takes us away from being human. And I hadn't quite realized that that's probably a very bad thing. Like, you see some human limitations and you say it'd be great if we didn't have this. Although now that I'm listening to you, I'm like, well, maybe we should keep this. So the question is, where does this end? Do we stop inventing technology? Do we become technology? I have a problem with my eye. I'll replace it with a camera, so on. Or do we try and convince Elon Musk to... And by the way, I would love a conversation with Elon Musk. That would be great.
We're at TEDAI 2026. Writing that down.
Or do we try to convince the tech bros to build for good, but I'm not even sure what that means or if that's possible. Anyway, where does this end is the question. I'm glad we have a philosopher.
Is that a hand as an answer to the question? Or okay, then maybe let's quickly answer how it ends.
With you? I don't know.
I
You have to admit that you don't know.
Well, none of us know. But we are not going to stop developing technology. No way. Because that's part of being human. So, because we acknowledge we have these limitations, we know that we don't know, we know that we just have to find our ways, then we will constantly try to come up with ways to make it easier or better, or, so we will continue. But I really love the way you framed it in the beginning. We should think of how do we make sure that we build technology that allows us to stay human. That was perfectly put, I think. Yeah, you said it, so you're allowed to use it again.
It's also the best medicine. Very often, we are the best medicine, better than any drug, just to sit down and care.
Before we move over to the next hand, when you said that, I thought of a quote from one of the former TED speakers that we've been working with. His name is Lark. He's an experimental artist, very well known for growing a third ear on his forearm a few years ago. So a very interesting person. And this quote was about, or to say it as he said it, he said, being human perhaps means not wanting to be human at all. This weight of being a human, of going through the suffering, going through that not knowing that we're sharing, and trying to get rid of it with technology, with innovation, again and again and again, until we distance ourselves as much as possible from it. And whether this is a good or a bad thing is up to debate. I just thought about it and I thought it might fit the conversation. There was one hand. We'll take another one there in the back, and then we'll be wrapping it up for today.
Thank you. Question to Pia. I also participated last year, and there were a couple of great talents already on the stage, and one of them said something like, based on the historical experiences, we tend to overestimate how fast changes might come, and we tend to underestimate the impact. This was Mikko Hipponen. And later on, Jürgen Schmidhuber said, this was the very last presentation, that whatever we think about what might come, it's nothing close to what will come. So the question, because I clearly remember these two gentlemen, for example, so the question to Pia, whether this is the right approach, that what the good life we want to create with AI, and how should we use AI to create this future, or we should think about things like, earlier today there was a great panel about epigenetics, where we learned, if I can oversimplify that, how much we could do more to prevent being sick if we were more conscious. And similarly to this, what Eva just said, that how many people just realize at the end of their life that how much they could do more if they were start thinking earlier. So question to you, Pia, who should do what? Somehow to have a wake-up call to the people that this is not the question whether the technology change will come or not, but what is the right time to really start thinking about, we as human, about what we want, irrespectively whether we accept the fact that the changes will come or not, but what should we do now? And who should do what to have this wake-up call for the people that they should start thinking? So that's my question.
Yeah, I'm a little bit scared about the who should do what. I think it's a big responsibility up here. But I'm really glad you're asking, because when you asked before over here, I felt like I wanted to share what I consider the really good news about AI. Because I can understand if you think, well, she's just being skeptical and she only thinks there are bad news. But in fact, also inspired by Heidegger, he said that when it gets as dark as it possibly can, the darkest of the dark in terms of technology, but also in terms of, at night. We know when it's the darkest of the dark, then the light starts to come. He said the same will happen with technology. And that's because, he said, at some point we will reach a point with technology where we will start asking questions about, was this what we wanted? Are we becoming who we want to be by using this technology, by developing technology? And if you look at AI compared to other technologies throughout history, that's exactly what it has done. None of us have been discussing Heidegger for the past 70 years. But now I sit on a stage like this and talk about Heidegger over and over again. Right? That's because we are all starting to ask some of the questions that pave the way for the light, that pave the way for us to start realizing that it's not only about our own biases built in technology, it's also about technology having an essence of itself that prevents us from, in some points, prevent us from asking the questions that makes us human. And that's because, unlike previous technology, AI has some kind of, it's like it's in our face. It's like we are not only, this technology is not only turning nature into a resource, because a lot of technologies have been doing that, but it's also turning us into a resource. Our data, our nature is being used in order to serve this new technology. And that's exactly the darkness we need to start asking questions. So in some way, AI is closer to art. The artificial and art are closely related. We've seen that also, at a conference like this. I think it's very obvious that there's something about art and the artificial. They have a dance going on. And in some ways, AI is closer related to art than previous technologies. And that's the good news, because what art does is that it makes us stop and start asking questions. Who am I in this? Why am I part of this? And should I be part of it? Or should I say, okay, maybe I cannot stop this revolution and evolution, but I can put my phone down right now and talk to this person sitting next to me in the train. This is choice we can make every day, right? Very easy. And I think more and more people are doing that. And if not the people in this room, then our kids. That's the good news.
Wonderful. One last question from the gentleman there.
Thank you, Pia, for your critical thinking. And basically, I agree with most of your points. But I also want to ask, why don't we just discuss the possibilities that we use AI to enhance our abilities to, build more connections between people? I have something from China to share, because I'm an author in China, and I just published a book in Chinese talking about AI applications in our societies. And this is a very interesting case, because basically it's one of my friends, and he just started a startup company to help old people to write their own memoirs with AI. In China, when we talk about old people at their maybe 70s or 80s, well, very few of them just receive the junior school educations. Most of them just cannot read or write. But now, if you have AI, and if you maybe his grandson or daughter with this AI, you can just interview with his or her grandfather and dig after all the untold stories of his or her own life. And that's amazing, because it forces our young people to talk with their old generations for 3 hours. And basically in China, I don't know if it's unique in China, because in China, very few fathers have talks with their sons like for 3 hours. The old people just feel so lonely in China. I don't know if it's similar in Vienna. I don't know. So now with AI, more and more his customers, clients realize the importance that, well, we never think this is possible because we are not journalists. They don't acquire the skills of interviewing, but now they can. So I will view this as a case that AI do help us to enhance our connections. What do you think? Thank you.
A couple of comments from both Eva and Pia.
Yeah, it's hard to answer. I mean, it has both sides. I think we were discussing that, and we have to be aware of there is no black-white thinking. In general, it's not useful to think in extremes as we see right now on this planet. So I would say, let's keep on discussing.
That's what Heidegger would say as well.
I'm sure.
And
we can make him live again.
Yeah. Some kind of, no. So, I think I'm thinking that great job identifying the problem. Fathers not talking to their sons.
Really?
I'm not sure the solution is to include a chatbot. I'd be like, why not help each other be better at having these conversations with our family?
But 3 hours is really long.
3 hours is a really long time, but I'm not sure it's needed. I don't know, when my kids were small in school, they got the assignment from their teachers to interview their grandparents. There came some very, very interesting conversations and reports out of that, also for the parents, because we hadn't been asking our parents these questions, but now the grandchildren did. Let me just say that I would prefer the grandchild asking the questions over the chatbot anytime. And then I would love to read the stories.
I think what we saw in this panel today is how much fun and exciting it can actually be to discuss what a good life is. I think we didn't reach a definition, but that also wasn't really the point. I think we are leaving with more questions, but I think this perhaps was the point, and I hope that you take away insights, Heidegger recommendations, and I'm wishing you a beautiful evening, whether you go to the dinners, whether you host or self-organize your own dinner. We'll see each other tomorrow for the TED Talks Day, where many different speakers will try to get to these very topics discussed today with their perspective. Thank you so much for coming. It was a pleasure, guys.